Hello, everyone. It's Linda Ockwell-Jenner here with another Motivational Steps Conversations. And I'm very excited today. I'm always excited, actually. You all know that because I have the most amazing guests come on my show. And I'm so grateful to all these lovely people for saying yes to Linda. So today I've got a very, very interesting person as my guest. I've met him a few times, not since COVID, and he's called David Peduto. Senior Manager, Public Sector Intelligence Services at Recorded Future. And David is, I believe, located in Denver. Hello, David. Thank you for coming along today.
Hi, Linda. Thanks so much for having me. Pleased to be here.
And you are in Denver, yeah?
Just outside of Denver, yep.
Because I know you travel the world with your work, and that's how we sometimes bump into you.
That's right. City here, city there. Yeah.
So, not trying to make people scared or anything, but you're in quite a unique business. So I don't know how much you want to say about that, what Recorded Future is. It's entirely up to you, David.
Well, no, thanks so much. Yeah, I'll just take a minute and also just note, too, that I'm speaking as an individual today, not a representative of the company. The story I'll share is my own. But I have had the pleasure of working at Recorded Future now for just over 10 years. We are now the world's largest intelligence company. And to be part of that growth from when it was super early startup to now where it is today is pretty powerful. So I have worn a lot of different hats over that time frame. Linda, I'm sure every time I met you, I had a different job at Recorded Future. But I've just been blessed to work with some phenomenal, top-notch individuals who challenge me on a daily basis and in support of a really important mission. And I think the work we're doing in support of Ukraine kind of speaks to the real-world implications of that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I have the pleasure of knowing you purely through my long-suffering husband, Dave Ockwell-Jenner, who is in the same kind of world as you guys. And I could be wrong, don't quote me on this, but I think when Dave worked at his last organisation, he may have been the first customer in Canada for the organisation. So we kind of won't let you go now. We follow you around the world because you guys are so interesting. We were talking recently on LinkedIn, which is a wonderful resource, and I asked you if you could tell me a little bit about, your personal story and where it led you, if you don't mind, because it's so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it almost kind of leads into how I get to Record a Future in the first place. What I wanted to do today is just share a little bit more of that story. And one thing that I think is somewhat symbolic is the fact that on the March 19th, we'll hit the 20-year mark since the start of the Iraq War. This is not going to be a political endeavor or anything like that, but that was a big part of my life as a kid. I was a child of 9/11. I was 12 years old when 9/11 happened. And those years, 2001, 2002, 2003, were foundational in life choices that I made down the line to lead me to where I am today, professionally and, even more importantly, personally. So what I thought I could do is share a little bit of that journey with you today, Linda, if that sounds good to you.
It sounds absolutely fantastic. And don't tell my other guests this, nobody will know this, but I think you're going to be one of the most interesting guests I've had on because basically, no, I'm just joking. Actually, they know I love them all. I am very interested though, because it must have impacted you, I guess, as a child. Did it impact you emotionally, 9/11? Do you remember the feelings you had? Were you scared? Were you frightened?
Absolutely. Yeah. It was picture day at my middle school. I was a newly minted seventh grader. And the first I heard about it was coming back from getting my picture taken. And I heard a friend in the hall say that there was a bombing at the World Trade Center. That's what I heard, the World Trade Center. And I was like, I didn't understand what that meant. And even when it became clear that he said, no, the World Trade Center, I still didn't know what that meant. Because to me, it had always been the Twin Towers. I grew up in Virginia. We had family in Boston. We would always drive by the city of New York and could in the distance always see the Twin Towers. And to me, that was a marker that we were getting closer to our family. So that's how I knew these buildings. And then to see them that day attacked. And then obviously the Pentagon and Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The terror of that day is something that I still feel to this day. Whenever the number 9/11 comes up, if it's 9/11 p.m., if I get a sandwich and it's $9.11, I immediately go back to that day in my mind. So yeah, the impact was something that I felt at a very, very deep level as a 12-year-old kid. And it's never really left me. And I knew that really the next day, September 12th, that I wanted to do something about it. When news started to come out about this guy named Osama bin Laden and this group named Al Qaeda and this language called Arabic and this religion called Islam that I knew nothing about, as a 12-year-old, I told myself, I'm going to learn Arabic, I'm going to join the CIA, and I'm going to defend my country from this ever happening again. So I was on that path, and then made some choices along the way that led me away from government service, but ultimately led to some pretty profound personal experiences that have shaped who I am. So for me, I was determined to learn Arabic. I picked my college, Middlebury College in Vermont, because it is the best language school in the country, if not the world for that matter. So I studied hard and I went into college with the intent of joining the CIA on the back end of graduation. But it wasn't until I got to college, it wasn't until I started to learn this language that was completely foreign. And that to me, growing up in a post 9/11 America, was automatically associated with this religion called Islam and these terrorists who practice Islam. It wasn't until I started to learn it that I realized it's more than just a tool. It wasn't just a tool. It was really a key to this whole new part of the world that I knew nothing about, to this whole religion that I knew nothing about, to this whole culture that I knew nothing about. And for me, what became particularly powerful was this idea that those scary looking texts that you would see on those terrorist videos, I could actually understand. And there was something about knowing what was being said, what Osama bin Laden was saying in a video message, that made it less foreign to me. And because it was less foreign to me, it was less scary to me. And because it was less scary to me, I could contextualize it, not justify it, but contextualize it in a more profound way and recognize that someone like Osama bin Laden was speaking for one person, not a faith of 1.6 billion people. And I think we do ourselves a great disservice when we associate, one individual who's unelected, right? Not democratically elected, but we associate the actions of an entire identity group because of one bad apple, if you will. So for me, it was really a transformative experience in college. And I actually studied Arabic. I did a summer language school we had a language pledge at Middlebury. So you could only speak that language when you were at the summer school for the 9-week program or however long it was. I remember sending an email to my mom in Arabic, and she would have to use Google Translate to understand what I was saying.
Oh, David, your poor mom. I bet she's thinking, who is this little boy who's grown up into this amazing individual?
And so from there, I actually studied abroad in Egypt. That was part of the program as well. So I spent a semester abroad in Alexandria, Egypt. This was 2009. And so before the Arab Spring, if you will, in 2011. But I was there studying Arabic and living a life centered around my language study. So I was living in a dorm with Egyptian students. Actually, the student who lived next to me, his name was Osama. And I can't begin to tell you how different he was than the Osama that I knew growing up, right? And that was just an incredibly profound experience for me to realize that there's so much more to, this faith called Islam when you actually live side by side and study with Muslim students who are practicing a faith that has a lot of parallels to Christianity, which is what I believe in. It was incredibly powerful to realize that there's a lot more to Egypt than just the pyramids,
This is such a wonderful message. I wish more people would spread that message. It's wonderful.
And what I learned too, Linda, is that when you start to challenge these stereotypes, they work both ways. Because people, when I was in Egypt and I would start to speak Arabic, people see me, this white American guy, and they just stop. They don't know what to do because why are you speaking Arabic? What, are you Muslim? Like, do you have family from the Middle East? And I told them, no, I'm not Muslim. I have complete respect for the Islamic faith, but I'm a Christian. And, I wanted to study Arabic, and here I am practicing it. So thank you for bearing with me in my poor attempt to speak Egyptian Arabic, which is a variant of what we learned in college. But I have a very strong memory one time when I went to just a local juice place to get a shake or something after a workout, and this these teenagers, they probably came from playing soccer or something, came in and ordered, and I just started talking to them in Arabic and like, oh, this is so cool. But as I was leaving, there was one kid from that group who just stared at me. This, 100-mile stare that he had. And as I'm getting into the taxi, I thought to myself, maybe I'm the first American that he's ever met. And here I am speaking his language. I'm not a soldier. I'm not wearing camouflage. I'm not carrying a gun. I'm not demanding that he, learn English and meet me in my comfort space. But that was just a really powerful idea, because I remember thinking, what if he goes home and tells his parents about this man, this American man that he met? And maybe that could challenge some stereotypes they have about Americans, much like my stereotypes about Egyptians or people who speak Arabic were challenged on a daily basis in a positive way when I was in Egypt. So it was pretty impactful, and it just has always stuck with me.
It's dramatic, I find, and very inspirational memory, because one person can make lots of changes for themselves, about themselves, and spreading such an important message then and now. You may reach just one person, but that one person counts, I think. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing that you've done. But I want you to carry on, because there's so much more to come.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Where I've learned. So I was never in the military. I never worked in the government. And to me, service has always been an important part of who I am. And I have tremendous respect for folks that have served in the military, have worked in government, defended our freedoms. I distinctly remember during an internship when I was in college, actually in DC, I was speaking with this Air Force colonel, and he told me that you don't need to wear stripes on your sleeve to serve your country. And that has always stuck with me, because what that meant to me was that in my capacity as a private American citizen, I could really practice like public diplomacy. You know, I could be and take it as a responsibility, not just something for granted, but as a responsibility as an American citizen to challenge whatever prevailing assumptions people might have about someone like me, because I look the way I do, talk the way I do, and because I was born in a certain country. So for me, I think you're absolutely right, Linda, what you're saying about these individual connections you can make with people. You don't know how far those ripples extend. I remember one time in Boston, years after I got back from Egypt, I was in an elevator and I saw a woman wearing an Egyptian flag necklace. And I asked her in Arabic if she was Egyptian. And she said yes. And we started talking in Arabic. And she told me in English, "I'm so honored that you learned my language." And I thought to myself, I can't imagine an American saying that to someone who comes to the United States. "I'm so honored that you learned English."
I want everybody to think I'm still a nice person.
So what's so funny about this is, right, I studied in Egypt. I had a phenomenal experience. And at the end of that, I distinctly remember this too. We're going to the airport, an American classmate and I, still speaking Arabic because that was part of the language pledge. And like I had become accustomed to doing, was speaking with a taxi driver. And early on in my time in Egypt, an Egyptian friend who became very close told me, "You want to talk to the taxi drivers because most of them smoke, most of them are missing teeth. And if you can understand them, you'll have no problem understanding Egyptian Arabic, which is a certain dialect." And that proved very sage advice. So I would learn how to speak with the taxi drivers. And, they get their pulse on everything. But so I was speaking Arabic properly to him, but it just wasn't connecting. And he kept asking me, like, "What are you saying? What are you saying?" And what I realized by the end of the trip was that he wasn't listening to what I was saying because he was looking at what I was saying. Um, I don't think it kind of computed in his mind that, wait a minute, this guy sitting in my back seat who's an American is speaking Arabic. Um, and that also stuck with me because sometimes these perceptions can get in the way of actual understanding, which is where the real magic happens.
I think so. And perceptions causes lots of trouble. Perception, yeah, it's like passed on from person to person. Like anything in this life, we can influence people in a positive way, which we think is a positive way, but someone else may perceive it to be a negative way. And I think the way you're explaining it today in this conversation may well open people's minds to thinking about perception. And for instance, I don't speak any other language other than English. I feel quite lazy, but I find wherever we go in the world, people of different, speak different languages, are very kind and very nice to me. Would that be, though, because I am a British person, I am white? I mean, I don't think everybody in the world gets treated kindly because of the language they speak. So for you, talking about these barriers that you've broken down, not just by going to school and college, but what you've broken down, from a thought as a young 10-year-old, I think it's amazing.
And it's so funny. Well, thank you for mentioning that, because you start to see how these stereotypes get compounded by, let's just say, for lack of a better word, Hollywood. Because once I started learning Arabic, I would see how Arabs were portrayed in films. And for example, Back to the Future, right? Great movie, fantastic movie. But the opening sequence when Marty and Doc are getting shot at by the quote unquote Libyans, the Libyans aren't speaking Arabic. It's complete gibberish that is coming out of their mouths to sound something like Arabic. But that does a disservice to everybody involved, right? And it kind of further perpetuates these stereotypes. And it's really not all that uncommon to how, like with, I think it was Rocky 3 or 4, but how folks of Russian descent were portrayed in American cinema during the Cold War, and could very well be portrayed again today with kind of the dynamics in the world as it is. So it's an uphill battle for sure, recognizing that I don't quite have that platform, at least not yet. But I think it's important, if we're going to be honest to ourselves, and if we're going to really live out the values that we otherwise pretty loudly promote around, democracy. Because there's something undemocratic when we just associate our expectations with someone we know nothing about based on how they look or how they talk or how they act. So Egypt was kind of a stepping stone, if you will, because I, in short order, took it to a whole nother level by working in Pakistan. But before I get to that, I want to share another anecdote, if I may.
Oh, please do. I'm just like, I just can't stop listening. It's just amazing that this started, when you were a young 10-year-old. Please carry on.
Yeah. So when I get back to college, I continued my Arabic study. So at this point, I was at a level of Arabic proficiency where I was taking a class in Arabic about Arabic poetry, which was fascinating. And Arabic, of course, gets a bad rap as a language. But if you want to hear something beautiful, do yourself a favor and listen to some Arabic poetry. It's pretty powerful stuff. Even if you don't understand it, just the cadences and the rhythms. It really is a beautiful language if we can get over that mental barrier in our head. But by the time I got back from Egypt, this idea of joining the CIA was still there, but it didn't have the draw on me as it once did. So I think it was my senior year. I went to there was a career office, right? And they had a fair, and they had 2 individuals from the Central Intelligence Agency who, very professionally only gave their first names and spoke about the work that they did. And there was a room full of other people, of other students. Some of them I knew closely, and it was kind of this, unwritten rule that we wouldn't talk about this, but man, this is cool to see you here too, wanting to do this work. And now I understand why we took all those Middle Eastern history classes together, right? So they're talking, and it's great. And then one of the representatives says, "Okay, I'd like to play a game. Who wants to play a game with me?" And just crickets. So I raise my hand, and she says, "Okay, well, pick a country in the world." And I said, "Okay, Afghanistan." She said, "I'm now going to ask you a series of questions about that country, and we'll just kind of go along, because these are expectations of things you should know if you want to do this type of work." What she didn't know is that at that point, I was doing a thesis on the Taliban resurgence in post 2001 Afghanistan and had a number of close Afghan friends. So learned a lot about the culture, the country, the dynamics at play there. So she was asking these questions like rapid fire, and not to pat myself on the back too much here, but I was able to respond in a pretty, I think, a thorough way that maybe caught her off guard a little bit. So if that was a test, I felt that I had passed. And people came up to me afterwards like, "Oh man, that was so cool." But Linda, I distinctly remember, this is my senior year of college. Okay. So I need to figure out what I'm doing next for a job when I graduate. But I remember leaving that session, and in the pit of my stomach, like I can still feel it. This truth that I couldn't do this work. And what I realized was that I had so many friends who I had made over the years who were not American citizens, and had built relationships with these folks that I didn't want to jeopardize or use in a way that was only utilitarian for purposes that I might have professionally. And I have tremendous respect for the CIA and like-minded intelligence organizations. The work that they do is incredibly powerful. But that was just a profession for me that, despite wanting to do this since I was 12 years old, suddenly didn't make sense. And I remember working my way through the application and then saying, you know what, I can't do this, ripping it up and throwing it away. And here I was, my senior year of college, basically starting square one with the job hunt, and actually didn't have a job when I graduated. I thought this was going to be a career, this was going to be a path and everything. And I said goodbye to that. But in my heart of hearts, it felt like the right thing to do. And I'm glad it did, because like I said, I graduated without a job, but a couple months go by and I bump into a family friend who tells me I should check out this company. And I landed with a company that did crisis response management. And they were actually opening up their first overseas office in Islamabad, Pakistan, of all places, right? So I made it through the interviews, was informed that this role was going to be based in Pakistan when the visa situation is such. Are you okay with that? And I said yes, and talked about my knowledge of the area, having done a thesis on the Taliban and interest in the broader Middle East, and was up for the challenge. So my boss, who was the director at the time, was born in Pakistan, grew up there. So I was traveling with him and working closely with him to help set up this office. And I was the only, he might have been a Pakistani and American citizen. I was the only white American citizen operating in this office that was then going to be staffed by local Pakistani professionals. So yeah, you can imagine my family was at first concerned that I was going to Egypt, and then when I tell them Pakistan, this is a whole nother level. And importantly, this was just 1 year after Osama bin Laden was killed in Pakistan. So the United States has looked on pretty kindly at this time in Pakistan, which is the second most populous Muslim country in the world, the sixth most populous country in the world. It was actually, even before Israel, a country founded as a Muslim state. Israel obviously founded as a Jewish state, but this was founded as a state for Muslims, kind of this Muslim Zion, if you will. And it was a challenge, but I thought this was going to be a unique opportunity that I could kind of put myself to the test and, get paid while doing so.
Okay, that's a good point. I must ask though, I guess your parents realised that this was something you had to decide for yourself, because all good parents have to let their children make the decisions. And if it's not the right decision, at least it's a learning experience.
Yes. And I mean, to their credit, they understood that this was something I had to do. And I was for a while trying to figure out, professional ways I could work in Afghanistan, because like I said, it remains a very close place to my heart. Nothing was really working on that front. I had applied for a Fulbright in Turkey, and that kind of fell through. And then when this opportunity came up, I thought I was fairly well positioned. I built a meaningful, trustful relationship with my boss, and let my parents know that this is what I have to do for me. And at that point, 22, 23 years old, so I'm an adult, and we had many conversations, but it was important, and they understood and recognized that I wasn't going to act in a foolish, uh, let's just say a foolish way. That I was going to take care of myself and um, not make the international headlines, if you will.
I am sure they knew that you wouldn't do anything like that because, if you've managed to go and go to Afghanistan and, do all the things you've done, I think basically you could be trusted.
Well, thank you. So I did go, and the visa situation didn't quite work out in the favor. I would only get 30-day visas every time I applied for it, whatever. So I ended up making about 3 trips in total. I made 3 trips in total, about 2 months. My mom really felt that last trip I was really pushing my luck. But I mean, here's the reality. Pakistan is a beautiful country with a tremendous history and people who welcomed me into their lives and into their homes. And that's true even in some areas that we might associate only with the very worst people and places. For example, I went to Abbottabad, which is where bin Laden was hiding out and where he was killed. And my friends took me. Actually, it's a pretty funny story because we were leaving that morning. They picked me up in a car, and we're leaving the capital city, Islamabad, and there was a checkpoint to get out. And one of my friends looked over to me and said, they're all Pakistani. She said to me, "They probably think we're kidnapping you." It's like, oh, this is a fun way to start the trip. But we were meeting a friend who's from there for breakfast with her family. They had this very nice spread, and the deference they gave to her family elders was something I wish we could replicate in our homes. But after that, like, okay, let's go check out where the compound was. And for me, this was this was like a full circle moment. I'm someone who, when 9/11 happened, knew that at some point I was going to have to go to ground zero. It's the same reason people are attracted to the exact spot where Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, or the exact spot where some historical event takes place, right? You want to stand where it happened. And I thought this would be a pretty unique opportunity for me as an American to do so. So there's 2 cars of friends, and we're navigating down this like alleyway. And then some friends in the car ahead decide to stop and turn around and say, "This isn't going to be smart and safe for us to do with you in the seat in the car with us." The ISI is kind of their internal intelligence service, and they have people around there. It's like, we're not going to take any risks. So I'm like, okay. So I was a little disheartened because like, oh, I'm so close, like literally a couple hundred meters away from where this happened, but wasn't able to make it there. But what surprised me the most was what happened next, and I think speaks to the caliber of people I was with. So I was slightly disappointed, but they take me like, we're just going to go up the road a little bit. It was maybe a couple miles away. They take me, and they knew I was Christian. They knew it was a Sunday. They took me to a church in Abbottabad, Pakistan, a Catholic church, and I'm Catholic. And I was completely blown away. Here I was 10 minutes earlier on the way to Osama bin Laden's compound, or what remained of it anyway. And 10 minutes after that, I'm in a pew at a church listening to the priest talk about being a stranger in a strange land. And it was a really powerful moment for me. It's a really beautiful moment. And for my Muslim friends, my Muslim Pakistani friends, to experience that with me, to afford me that opportunity, and to experience it by going in the church with me, understanding how important this is to me, and going out of their way to make me feel welcome.
And you see, this is another thing people don't understand. Everybody's like seen as the same people, you know, because of the religion. Again, we go back to that. But you took the time to make true friends, which you're probably still friends with now for life. And I think that's absolutely amazing. But if I was watching this on the TV in a movie, I'd be getting scared by now, thinking, what is going to happen to this guy? Luckily, you're sitting in front of me, so I know you survived anything that might have happened to you. But
That happened on the final trip, Linda, and that's the last thing I want to share. And then obviously can take any questions. But
I just think you're the most amazing, interesting, but very authentic human being.
well, thank you. And that's an important piece, I think, to who I am, but also just to how we can even conceive of potentially challenging some of these prevailing stereotypes. And to me, being authentic requires a high degree of humility, because I didn't go into the office where I made friends with my colleagues, beating my chest, saying, I'm an American, I'm the boss, listen to me. I mean, on the 4th of July, which isn't really a holiday celebrated in Pakistan, right? We in America are used to seeing flags trampled on in this part of the world. My friends made me an American flag cake. Uh, and what's so funny is before I left for Pakistan, my American friends made me a Pakistan flag cake. So kind of like, yes, I know, so spoiled, yeah, so spoiled. So, but that's the type of caliber of person, and that I was with, and that requires humility on their part too. I mean, I spoke with one woman who told me that she was younger than I was when 9/11 happened, and actually cheered it, because she, growing up in Pakistan, knew a world where America was everywhere, doing everything all at once. And it wasn't until her grandfather said, no, you should not be cheering. There are innocent people who are hurt and killed by this. This is not something to be excited about, that she understood kind of the error of her ways, if you will. But that was a perspective that I could only get by building trust with this individual. And that to me required humility and a genuine interest in their story, you know, learning about their country, learning about their faith, and learning about them as people. So the final thing I wanted to share with you, kind of the culmination of the whole experience, was in that third trip, um, in this city called Lahore, right? This metropolis in Pakistan. And Lahore is unfortunately the site where a CIA contractor shot and killed, I think it was 2 Pakistani police officers. Raymond Davis was his name, and this was a few months before, I believe, the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad. But so my guard was kind of up, knowing that as an American, I was going to this city. But they've got this beautiful, beautiful Badshahi mosque that is, I mean, to me, it's a wonder. The majesty of this building. I had a chance to walk around there. Lahore Fort is also beautiful. Um, but the mosque, the most profound moment I had in the whole set of experiences came as we left the mosque. So, as you probably know, in Muslim culture, when you enter a mosque, you leave your shoes at the door. So we left our shoes, and it's like, I think it's early September. It's very hot in Lahore, and we are putting our shoes back on, and this gentleman with his wife and 2 young kids comes and sits down right next to me. I have my Pakistani friend to my left, and this gentleman who's got kind of a salt and pepper beard sits right next to me. And he says hello. In my limited Urdu, I speak, said hello back, and we exchanged some pleasantries. And then my friend started to translate. I'm sorry, at this point it was probably Punjabi, not Urdu, but my friend was translating. And it gets to a point where the gentleman asks me, through my friend, um, what religion are you? And that's not really an uncommon question, because they're, almost confused. He was confused about what I'm doing here. And I told him I'm Christian, but I have complete respect for Islam. And he just kind of waved his finger at me. And I thought, great. This is the moment where the helicopter is going to come in, and I'm going to be led away in cuffs, because I'm, this American Christian here in Lahore. So He's waving his finger at me and proceeds to tell me that um, Muslims respect other religions respect Muslims, but Christians don't. And I was somewhat shocked by that because I just told him that I do. So I said, well, can you tell me, why you feel that way? And all he said, all he said by way of a response was Terry Jones. And I thought he was still speaking, Punjabi. So I was like, I couldn't make sense of what he just said. What does this mean? And my friend said, no, David, Terry Jones. And I'm like, I still don't understand what that means. And then his eyes get wide. He's like, David, Terry Jones, the man who burned the Quran.
Oh, yes.
Linda, your reaction is the reaction that I had. Um, in that moment, this memory of this man with kind of this handlebar white mustache, this pastor in Florida, who threatened to and ultimately did burn the Quran, um, was a very strong memory for people in Pakistan and around the area. I mean, this led to protests. People were killed as a result of some of the engagements because this single American thought it was his prerogative to burn the Quran. And importantly, in the Islamic tradition, the Quran is literally the word of God. Um, we know that the Bible contains the word of God, but is the work of man. There's some intermediaries there. The Quran is literally the word of God in written form. So that is part of its sacred nature. And to burn that is the worst possible blasphemy. So I immediately, this image comes back and I kind of whip around to this guy and I tell him, Terry Jones does not reflect me. He doesn't reflect me as a Christian, doesn't reflect me as a American. That is not what I stand for, not what I believe in. And I'm sorry that is your association. And, he was receptive to that. And we ended the conversation in a very pleasant way. But as I'm walking down the steps of Badshahi Mosque, now with my shoes on, it hit me. Growing up, this guy's association to Christianity through the lens of one person who I view as a wacko. Growing up, that was my lens of Islam through the person of Osama bin Laden. And it took me to be on the other side of that equation to realize just how hurtful that can be. And how, like I said earlier, undemocratic it can be. Like, bin Laden wasn't elected to any position. He doesn't represent the prevailing opinion in any way, shape, or form of Muslims the world over. For him, religion was a means to an end, and he exploited it and got a group of followers who bought into it and exploited it as well. And I learned that exploitation of religion occurs in more than just one faith, including my own. So it was a pretty profound moment for me. And I thought to myself, if it took me to come to Pakistan on this third trip just to have this experience, literally everything was worth it. Because that's a story for me that made this incredibly personal and realized that, before we go casting stones here to others, we should probably do a little internal work ourselves. And I came back incredibly motivated on a personal level to do what I could to kind of help continue to dispel some of these stereotypes, some of these perceptions and prejudices that unfortunately lead to violence and lead to sentiment that just doesn't have much place in our value system. I really believe that people tend to hate what they fear and they fear what they don't know. And rather than trying to humble themselves and appear weak by being a coward and, trying to learn a thing or two, there's like this machismo that just takes the place of this knowledge that is completely fabricated in order to really express this unfounded dominance, that idea that might equals right, which I fundamentally don't agree with. So it's an uphill battle, of course, trying to do this.
That was my question. I'm very much like you in a small way. I don't go to all these dangerous countries, but I've watched some movies and I get really scared. And it always seems like, I'm not going to name any countries, but the country that maybe the Americans or the English are, that, it always seems like they're the bad guys. but I wish we could open people's eyes a little bit more. Like, luckily, probably like you with your children, we've enabled our children to have many choices about religion and other stuff, but to engage in conversations like this. And we're all human beings. We may be different, but you are right. It just takes one person who somehow gets people to follow them because those people are missing something in life. Maybe I don't really have the answer, but if there were more people like you out there and there were more people open to dispelling and sharing your circumstances and your experiences, I don't think we'd be able to change everyone. But like I say, one person at a time, it really, really makes a difference to me. And this is why I have these conversations. And I'm being completely honest. Normally it's about a career progression, but this is about your career progression. And what I think it's done for you, it's opened your eyes to wherever you work in the world, there are going to be some people who say, well, you're an American and Americans are this, that, and the other. But the most important thing is, gaining the trust and being authentic. And you obviously carry it on a daily basis. So I really applaud you for that.
Well, thank you, Linda. And it's hard. I try to, but I also feel just to make this the professional connection that you're alluding to, I agree. And we do ourselves a disservice when trying to understand geopolitical situations in the world or motivations of other actors based on stereotype. When we think about Iran, for example, as just this single evil entity, we are doing a disservice to the millions of Iranians who have had the courage in the past, number of months to go out into the streets against the regime that does not compromise. So, to me, it's forced me to think more holistically about problems in the world in which we live in, rather than this unilateral approach. And if I could just share one final thing, so I came back from Pakistan, didn't get killed or anything like that, which was great. My parents loved it.
I bet you were so funny. My parents loved the fact I came back alive. Of course they did.
But arguably one of the world's most dangerous places. But the crazy thing is, Linda, I came back and literally a few months later, the Boston Marathon bombings happened right by my apartment where I lived in Boston. And I actually couldn't go home that night because the bombings had taken place as part of the crime scene. And I walked by that every day, before and after the event. But one thing that I don't know many folks realize is that the finish line of the Boston Marathon is right next to the Boston Public Library, which has a phenomenal history associated with it. It's a tremendous institution. And right above that final stretch, like right after the finish line, etched in stone in the upper banner of the library is a phrase that I remember because it's so powerful. And it's that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth requires the education of the people as the safeguard of order and liberty. And I couldn't get over the fact that this act of terrorism happened across the street from a library that is meant to be an institution of education and knowledge. And what I also learned is that education and knowledge is a proactive endeavor. You're not going to be educated just because you take all your classes in high school and university. It requires much, much more than that. So the kind of that symbolism has always stuck with me and reinforced this idea that education doesn't stop. And if we do want to live in the best version of the society that we seek for ourselves, our kids and grandkids, it's really required. And I think that etching in the Boston Public Library is pretty profound in that regard, because if we do want to live in a society where people stop at red lights, the order element, and if we do want to live in liberty where I can have this conversation with you, Linda, in a public way, we need to be smart about how we do that and take responsibility with it. So, yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now, but
No, 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 no. I'm speechless because I love these conversations, but obviously you've got to be so careful today because so many people can attack you us online verbally. You made it very clear in the beginning this wasn't political, this wasn't anything, you know, that would offend people. But if people are offended, basically have conversations with other people about this, start conversations. I think I'm very naive in some ways because I honestly look around sometimes the state of the world. And yes, people think that a religion is, or all religions, some religions or religions are problems caused by certain demographics, certain people. Just very quickly, my children's father, sadly, he passed away. His mum was from Ireland, and we would never take the children to Ireland because we thought it was dangerous. And I regret that now, but we had to put our children first. And sadly, their mother-in-law has passed away. But Dave and I did take our youngest daughter as a young adult to Ireland, and she went to the birthplace of her grandmum. And it was lovely. But previous to that, we had a photo taken by the Peace Wall. It's quite famous. And it was a lovely photo, but the very next day, a bomb went off there. And again, it does scare me to think that could have been us in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I'm not going to blame everybody who's Catholic or lives in Ireland or who's Christian or who happen to be. And I think if more people were as open-minded as myself and you, slowly but surely the world would be a nicer place. So that's all we can hope for. But your story is absolutely phenomenal. I have never had such a conversation with anybody like that before in my life. I feel privileged to know you. And all I can say is thank you for your time. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Well, thank you, Linda. That privilege goes both ways. You have a remarkable story yourself. So thank you for sharing that with me over the years, and really for giving me a chance to speak with you today. I've really appreciated and enjoyed it.